Welcome to the Iteration Lab, a podcast where we explore how today's leaders are shaped by their history, their heroes, their heartbreaks, and their hopes. I'm your host, Mike Corbett. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Jarvis Consulting Group. At Jarvis, we spend our days helping organizations harness data and AI to build the future of tomorrow. But here, we're going beyond the technology. This is about the people behind the press releases, the pivotal moments that shape their careers, the mentors and philosophies that guide them, the setbacks that tested their resilience, and the hopes for the future that keeps them going. Each episode, I'll sit down with business and technology leaders across industries to uncover lessons they've learned and the mindsets that help them navigate change. Leadership isn't static, it evolves. And through these conversations, we'll see how that evolution shaped not just the leaders themselves, but the organizations and the futures they're building. So, let's get started.
One of the patients on stage talking about their journey and their experience and the Riderless bike, which is very painfully emotional. You can't get that any other way.
Welcome to the Iteration Lab. I'm your host, Mike Corbett. We are in Calgary, Alberta, with a very special guest. My guest today is a leader who oversees operational and engineering for Enbridge's liquids pipelines and one of the largest networks in North America. For over 2 decades, his career has spanned finance, strategy, infrastructure, from his early days at BMO to more than a decade helping Enbridge through growth and transition. He's also a cancer survivor, a dedicated mentor, a passionate cyclist, and the top fundraiser for the Tour of Alberta for cancer, turning challenge into purpose both at Enbridge and beyond. Please welcome to the Iteration Lab, Max Chan.
Thanks, Mike.
Max, take me back to the beginning. What were you like as a little boy?
According to my parents, my teachers, or me? I think I certainly got talkative a lot in my my report cards. Oh, Max, very talkative. Max, just a bit disruptive in class. So I think I was sort of a little more easily distracted as a child, and social. I guess I like talking to people. So that's why I'm here. But otherwise, had a lot of friends. I grew up in Calgary. Many of my closest friends from elementary school are still my closest friends to this day. So, I think I had a very, very good upbringing here. Lived in good neighborhood, good community with, like I said, good friends that we've remained friends to this day. And so, but yeah, I think pretty standard, young child here, out and about outside, played video games a bunch. I am young enough that there still were video games there in my childhood. So yeah, a lot of, I think, who I am today is certainly a credit to how I was brought up here by my parents and my family.
It's a little bit of a rebel, but consistency.
Wouldn't go far as rebel, but yeah, consistent.
Awesome. And how does your trajectory map onto what you envisioned?
I get asked this a lot, and to be very honest, it wasn't really a plan. So I couldn't say here honestly that, I'm where I thought I'd be or where I wanted to be at X age. Frankly, even as an undergrad in university, I honestly didn't know what I wanted to do. I did an econ undergrad here at the University of Calgary. I knew I didn't really want to be an economist, but what do you do with that? So, a lot of my career has sort of been, good fortune in terms of falling into the right places, but I think I was making the most of those. I'm very happy and very satisfied with my career choices and how they've gone, but I certainly would be a stretch to say it was sort of planned out and I'm on track or a vision that I thought I had.
Well said. So getting pointed in the direction of business and finance, would you say that was happenstance or just going with the flow to try to understand what direction it is you were seeking?
That one probably points back a bit earlier in life. Both my parents are accountants. So I grew up, with like a financial mind. My parents, being immigrants, good savers, a lot of focus on saving and financial discipline. So that was drilled into me at an early stage in life. I remember my dad teaching me how to read, the stock quotes in the newspaper. I am old enough there was newspapers. And so what a bid ask is, and you look the next day and all the stock prices are published and where to close that up or down. What is that? So I learned that early age. So that interested me early on. So that certainly had a big influence. And then when I got into university, like I said, I did an economics degree, continued that interest, but not sure what to make make of it. And then, I was fortunate. I started my career at BMO, and that really opened my eyes. So on the banking side, I was like, yes, this is where I was meant to be. And so that led to an 11-year career there.
Yeah, over a decade at BMO. So what were some of the defining lessons or experiences that shaped how you think about leadership and risk?
Yeah, I was. So I actually started as a summer student at BMO. Before my last year, I landed a summer internship just a couple blocks away from here. During that time, I met some really great people that I worked with who became good mentors to me. And so I'd say my career at BMO can be summed up as having had great mentors, great bosses. They weren't always the same people. Great colleagues and great clients. So I had a really great experience there. So in terms of leadership, it really, I think, instilled in me at an early age in my career, both what I thought a good leader looked like and how they behaved, and really shaped I think who I am today. And we'll get to a little bit later, but in terms of my view and values of mentorship, really started there.
Awesome. We'll dig into that. And eventually you made the pivot to Enbridge and the energy sector. What was behind that decision?
It wasn't a real plan. It was more happenstance. I had finished my MBA by that time, so still working MBA. We had our second child on the way, and so there's just a lot of life change happening. And so it kind of provoked the question in my mind about, okay, had a good run to here. What's next? Like, the proverbial chapters in a book. Okay, chapter 1. It's been good. Great. Okay, this feels like a clear line of demarcation now. Where do I go from here? And I had a hard time really getting excited that, a leadership executive role at the bank was what I wanted to do. And there's nothing, the bank was great to me and the industry is great, but I couldn't get excited for whatever reason. And what I took away from that was maybe that's the cue or the signal to start thinking about something else. And as it turns out, right around that time, an old boss who's still a very close friend today, he had moved over to Enbridge a few years prior, and we always stayed in touch. He was just very excited, always very happy, very challenged. I just spoke very highly of the work, the company, the environment. I was like, wow. So I was thought, there's something to it. And he came calling one day and said, hey, long shot. You and I always worked really well together. Have you considered doing something totally different? I was like, well, funny timing. I've actually been thinking about this for a little while now. And as it so happens, I am thinking about maybe this is the right time to try something different. And so that's how it came to be. I otherwise didn't really have any knowledge of the company. I didn't cover pipelines when I was at the bank specifically. And so took a bit of a flyer in terms of that change. But there's not a lot of chances in your life where you can change your career. That you can actually do anytime. But it's hard to do that in conjunction with picking your boss. And so those things lined up for me and ended up being a good situation.
Well said. Well said. I've seen time and time again, as people get older, have kids, have a mortgage, it's very hard to walk away from one situation to another where it's foreign territory. Taking risk and not knowing what that path will lead you, where you don't have all of the relevant experience. Most people don't make that change.
Oh yeah, I'm by nature generally a low risk individual, right? I have a stable job, I have benefits, a pension, all these things. But I was also only 32, so it is a little bit early to be kind of locking out a lot of other opportunities. But I understand exactly what you're saying, is that was tough, right? I enjoy stability, predictability, and this was a big leap.
That's great. So you're not afraid to take a leap. You've also spoken quite openly about your personal health journey. How did facing kidney cancer shape the way you approach your career?
Well, that was a surprise, needless to say, and not something I expect. Nobody ever expects that. I was 41 at the time. Yeah, it was a shock to get that phone call from the doctor to say, "Look, we need to see you today, and it's not going to be good." So you hear those words, "You have cancer." It's kind of what it looks like, on TV and on movies, right? It's just jarring. You don't hear anything after that. Timing couldn't have been worse either in terms of what was going on in the world. So this is February of 2020, and as you all know, a month later the world's shut down. So kids are at home, companies, offices are closed, like mass panic essentially. So fast forward, Mike, 5 years later, I've learned a lot from it. I think it's helped shape a lot of how I think about life, generally speaking. We can touch a lot more on that, but it sounds weird to say it this way, but I'm almost glad this happened. And I'm proud of it, actually. That I say very strongly, I am proud of it because I've been able to take away from it. And I got lucky in terms of survived. I'm here. The benefit of very good healthcare. And, but I'm proud because it's given me a platform to talk about, use it for a variety of, I think, purposes to help both, from a cancer perspective, raise money, raise awareness, but also just reframe what's important in life. I don't sweat the little things as much. When you go through something like that, you take stock of the bigger picture. And I think from a leadership perspective, it's a great metaphor. You have to be always mindful of the bigger picture. You got to understand the details, but it all ultimately comes back to the bigger picture. And I think as people, especially driven people, type A's like yourself, we often do get caught up in worrying a lot about the things we can't control, and causes a ton of stress. And that's probably the biggest takeaway. Control what you can control. The things you can't control, look, you have to acknowledge them and be aware of them, but you can't let it take over your life. So it's a lot of that. Those are probably the biggest takeaways for me.
Don't sweat the small stuff.
Don't sweat the small stuff.
I love it. Who's someone you looked up to, professionally or personally? Who or what has had the lasting impact that they've left on you today?
Yeah, like I said earlier, my parents, I think, obviously helped set the foundation of who I am. So both personally and professionally, I think they instilled, they were the ones who instilled a lot of volunteerism. I'll talk to you later, but, just like I was saying, professionally, it got me kind of interested in the, finance and side of it. And like I said earlier, drilling into me that financial discipline, as a new, immigrant family, saving and just being financially responsible was a big part of that. So that's really helped set my interest just generally in finance, right? And things about money. Professionally, I've had a lot, and I don't take any of that for granted. When I was a summer student, I had a couple of people take me under their wing at the bank. I didn't know it at the time. It took me a little while to realize, like, that's actually, they were mentors. That's what they were doing. I don't think they realized that. They're just good people. I was an inquisitive young mind who wanted to learn and work, and they said, hey, take this person with us and show them the ropes. So I had a number of people at the bank, both people I worked with and people who were tangentially around me, where I looked up to them. I really admired their careers. So they look like they've done it right. Like, I didn't know. I was 21 when I started. Like, what do I know? But I knew enough to say, like, I like the way that person conducts themselves. I feel like our values are aligned. And probably what it came down to is how they treated people. They treated me as a summer student or a new hire and, young intern as no different than others. But also they didn't treat peers or subordinates any different either. And I always respected that. And that's something I always look for in people, is how they treat people. It's very telling. Do you only treat people who, one way because it benefits you and others not, or everyone the same? So had a lot of good mentors, sponsors, whatever you want to call them, early in my career that really helped shape that. I still do today. But those formative years, when I look back now at my time at the bank, was very important to shaping professionally who I am today.
I couldn't agree more. Having a mentor, having having a place, a culture within your organization that supports that is very important.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen bad instances where people are just left to the side.
Yep.
And that's damaging to folks and companies on multiple fronts. So it's great that you've had that experience and recognize it.
Yeah. It's a huge part of my life today, which is why I'm so adamant about it.
That's great. You've spoken about culture fit and inclusive leadership being critical in M&A operations. How did you come to adopt those values?
Well, probably on a few fronts. I grew up in 80s and 90s in Calgary. There weren't a lot of people who looked like me at the time. Like most of the time through elementary and junior high, I would have been the only Asian kid in my class or even my grade. So I understood very early on what it felt like to be a bit of an outsider, a bit different. Like that wasn't lost on me early on. I don't know that, I experienced a lot of just overt discrimination as a result. I think I was lucky in that sense because I know not everyone has gone through life that way. But I was very aware what it feels like to be different. And so I think that has always been in the back of my mind as a leader, and you think about teams and building culture and inclusion. I think because it's always been part of my life, I haven't necessarily consciously and intentionally like we have to do this. It's just been part of how I thought about it because I've been on the other side, which is why I think it's important. This is the whole part of inclusion, is getting those different perspectives. And so I'm probably a little bit more aware, more attuned and more sensitive to it in terms of building teams and engaging people, that I want to hear from everyone. And I want that person who otherwise doesn't see themselves here to be part of this. And it's worked every time. Our teams have always been better for it. People are happier. Like we know all this. I see it every day. And it is very, very important to me and a big focus whether it's a team I'm building or just how I engage with people too, right? In a meeting, do you only talk to the most senior people or do you engage the junior people at the table? They're here, we might as well engage them. So it's things like that. It's not just about, the team that you have, but it's how you engage with other folks and other groups.
Well said. Well said. And you're known for a strong commitment to mentoring. What does mentorship mean to you? And why is it something you place such a heavy emphasis on?
So it's the influence I had early on in my career. I definitely am not where I'm at and do what I'm doing without having had the strong mentorship early in my career that really shaped it. And it's funny, at that time, I didn't realize what it was. I didn't even know, honestly, I didn't know what the word meant. If you asked me at age 21 what a mentor was, I'd be like, this is some really old guy talking to you about his life or career. But I didn't realize it, but it took a couple of years. When I look back, I'm like, actually, I had these people who were just there to help steer me. I could talk to, ask, what would otherwise be perceived as dumb questions, but no judgment, honest answers, good feedback. And so I realized, because where I started to realize it, I was a couple years into my career, and then I look at some other new grads coming into the workforce, and they're lost, and they're frustrated and confused, and just don't know where to go and who to talk to. And I'm like, oh, I have these great people, and that's when it sort of clicked with me. Like, having people you can talk to, again, it's quite often not and shouldn't be your boss, but just other people, either they're in the industry or in the company, that you can talk to. Ask these questions of like, what should I do in this meeting? Or, someone said this to me and they seemed upset, and how do I handle it? And every little thing like that, right? Having someone to go to ask those questions is so invaluable, especially early in your career, especially in a big company, right? You come out of a university or a school and everything's relatively well structured for you. Your classes have a start and an end, your semester has a start and an end, you go home. You get out into the real world, and that structure doesn't exist, and there's not someone there to tell you where to go next. Your next class is here, and go down a lot. And it can be very overwhelming for a young person. And so having that person to talk to is so important. So I had that, and I started to recognize it out there that not everyone does. And then coincidentally at that time, the University of Calgary had just launched a program through the Haskayne Business School, a mentorship program. There's a lot of irony to it, because that first iteration, I think it's 2004, was originally sponsored by Enbridge. It was called the Enbridge Mentorship Program, which is where I work today. However, at that time, I worked at BMO. Today, that same program, 20-something years later, is now called the BMO Mentorship Program. They launched this program, and I see a post and they're looking for mentors. And that's when I started to become aware of what a mentor was. But still in my mind, that was a sage, wise, gray-haired individual with a 30-year career, and that wasn't 24-year-old me or whatever I was at the time. But nonetheless, I'm like, well, what the heck? Put my name in there. I was accepted right away. I think largely they just needed bodies. It didn't matter. So the first student I was paired with, Cindy, and we're still friends to this day. We still stay in touch, and it's been really awesome watching her career unfold and blossom. I was pretty intimidated. I'm like, she's only a couple years younger than me. What am I going to be able to share with her that's of any value? And what I realized pretty quickly was everything I was just going through as a new hire, big company, the anxiety with that, the uncertainty she was about to go through. So my experiences were very fresh and relevant and like real time, and things that were going to be important to her in deciding what career path and what to do after graduation. I was only 24 months ahead. Now I think back now, I'm like 24 years ahead of some of these kids where maybe I'm on the outside now on this part. Now those memories are still very fresh to me. But that's kind of how it came to be. And so that first experience, I was like, this is actually fun. And I truly felt like I could help and actually add value to somebody's career and whether it was career decision-making or just help navigate the outside world. Here's what it's going to look like. This is the kind of stuff that's going to surprise you. This is the kind of stuff you can expect. Here's the unexpected that you're not going to know about. And that's kind of what kicked it off for me. And 20-something years later, I'm still going at it, and because it's very important to me.
So wherever you are, you're leaning in, and you see the value of that work that you do.
Yep,
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's become great. It's honestly, it's not a lot of time. That's what I tell people. It's not a lot of time commitment. It's this. Once every 4 or 6 weeks, you have a conversation. I do it with people at Enbridge. I do it with students. I'm still heavily involved with the university, a lot of students. And you don't understand and appreciate how valuable that will be to someone. Typically, those students won't recognize that value till later in life too. And I think the most rewarding part of all that is, I've been doing this for 20 plus years now. I stay in touch probably with still like 80% of my mentees over the years. And it's been so cool watching careers unfold. I've been to weddings, they've got families now, a lot of cases. They've moved. We still stay in touch. So it's just really neat seeing how people's lives and careers have gone from when I first met them.
Were there leadership styles that you saw or lessons you learned early in your career that you've been intentional about not wanting to emulate?
100% yes. I think anyone who's had any sort of job, whether you're a teenager or an executive, you have worked with and for some really bad people. So it's funny the way you phrased it too, that you intentionally tried not to emulate. So I had both sides of that coin. There's people I talked about earlier that I intentionally try to emulate. One I'll name, a guy named Robert Hayes, who I worked for at the bank, and he was only for a few years, but he was always there as a senior guy. And he was one of those people when I said I always looked to him like, this guy's got his stuff together, the way he treats people, the way he manages his family life, like he's got it figured out. So I always looked up to him to say, like, that guy's got it figured out. I want to be like Robert. And when I'm a leader, the way he handles it. And we still stay in touch to this day as well, because he still is very insightful for me on a number of these fronts. On the flip side, now I won't name names. It's not fair. We've all had it, and I'll describe the experience more rather than the person. But it was a boss who just wasn't a people person. They weren't a bad person. So I want to get they weren't a jerk. They weren't abusive. Like, they're not like that. But they just weren't a people person, and maybe chalk this up to our values didn't align. Where, as I said, I'm a big people person, and I ascribe a lot of value to relationships and how people treat people. So probably the best example what I'm trying to describe here is I worked for this person for probably 2 years, and I worked with them for several years prior. They were a peer who got promoted. After all that time, I don't think that person could have even told you one thing about my personal life. Are you married? Don't know. Do you have kids? No clue. Like, it was just only about the work and the work relationship, and there was no personal connection. So I think that's the part where it's always stayed in my mind. I didn't like it. I knew very quickly what I don't like. And so it just reinforced a lot of my values that you can't get anything done in the world without building some personal connections. And so that's why such a huge focus for me. I always thought that, and I've had really good positive reinforcements, positive role models on that. But, sort of the one negative just reinforced why that was so important to me. Again, not a bad person. It's just not any sort of interest or focus on personal connections. And you're going to have a hell of a lot harder time getting people to work with you and cooperate without that.
If it's transactional, people walk the other.
It doesn't matter if it's transactional. Just if you have to be around people all day long, and this person all day long, or that person, and you have no connection with them, and they're not putting in any effort to get to know you, that's a long day. That's a long day at the office.
That is. I can tell you've got some great experience. You've gone from finance into broader operational leadership. How has your view of leadership evolved through that specific transition?
Yeah, it's I'm living right now. So as I've come up, on the Enbridge, if I talk about my time at Enbridge, coming up through as treasurer, and I was a treasurer running risk management, and then 4 years as our corporate development officer doing an M&A, I had a good base knowledge, so good fundamental grounding in the subject matter. And so I could walk into each of those roles successively. I had a good understanding of the technical elements of it and kind of what was going on. Flip that to now, effective in July, I've moved over to this role, heading up operations and engineering for Enbridge's Liquids Pipelines Group. And as you heard, I'm neither an engineer or an operator. These are still soft banker hands, as I like to joke. And so now I have to rely on totally different skills and experiences, right? So I actually just got back from the field yesterday where I was with a bunch of our folks in Eastern Canada. And I can't come into a meeting or a situation with them and, tell them how to engineer or design something differently or better, or a field staff who is actually working on the tools of, an electrician or one of our mechanics. I am not in a position nor have the experience to tell that person how to do their job. So now I have to rely on my leaders and their leaders who do possess that. So now it's much more around trust. You hear the term trust but verify. I think it's a good way to describe it. So I trust that the folks who are in those positions have a good grasp. And the good thing is when someone like me comes in a role like that where you don't have that base knowledge, you end up asking a lot of questions that an outsider would say, well, that's kind of a dumb elementary question. Yeah, because I don't know. And what it ends up forcing the person on the other side to do is actually have to explain it as though you're explaining something to a 2-year-old. And it's a good test because it's a test of whether they know. So if you can't explain it to someone like me, starting from zero, if you will, clearly and concisely, then maybe you don't know. Now, that doesn't happen very often, to be clear. It's quite the opposite, where they're very clear. And so that helps me confirm, okay, they know what they're talking about. They're actually able to explain it to me at a level where I can grasp and understand it rather than getting overly technical. And so that is, as I'm experiencing right now, that's part of the biggest challenge out there is for me to listen, sit back. And in meetings now, because I don't necessarily have that subject matter expertise, it's a lot more sitting back and just letting, the other folks, they're the ones leading the conversation. They're the ones, with the subject matter expertise. It's hard sometimes, coming from a couple decades of having been, the more experienced person in the room to be able to lean in on that. But look, it's mentally reinvigorating as well because every day is a new learning experience.
A new challenge. Yep. That's a great way to look at it. Your knowledge and experience will never go stale, and you're constantly putting yourself in new situations.
That's right.
That's the sign of a good leader.
I hope so.
We've covered a lot of ground so far. Before we get into the heavy stuff, let's have a little fun.
Sure.
To mix things up a bit, we do a little short segment called The Fork in the Road.
Okay.
Think of it as a lightning round. This is just to see where your instincts lie.
Sure.
Early bird or night owl?
Early bird, definitely.
I can echo.
I'm asleep on the couch at 9:30. Okay.
So what time would you get up in the morning?
Between 5:30 and 6. And the worst part of that is it's sort of irrespective of time zone too. So then that kind of messes me up if I'm on a trip sometimes when I get back. But yeah, 5:36. I'm turning in my dad basically.
Waking up at 5 p.m. 5 a.m. here is very easy.
Yeah, for you, yeah. So I just came back from the opposite of that. So I had a couple of 6:30 a.m. wake ups in Eastern time zone this week. So those were a bit early.
Yep. Okay. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
And is that tied to the time?
So I didn't start drinking coffee till I had my first kid. So that's what did it for me. With 3 now. So it's just reinforced it. But yeah, definitely coffee.
Cool. Mountains or oceans?
You know, there's a bit of a cop out here. It's both. Having said that, it's probably more skewed to mountains. You know, we have a vacation property in the mountains, which we spend a lot of time as a family. So that's probably a little more skewed there. But I do like the ocean.
Those are tough ones. Books or podcasts?
More books, although doing podcasts now more often. I'm getting more into them, but traditionally been books.
It's changing.
It is. That. Yeah. You know, as I spend more time, you know, think about long trips, flights, time in the car, driving somewhere. Podcasts are an efficient way to just get the information now.
Any good ones on top of your mind?
Well, hopefully this one. I am literally just getting into them now. So, yeah, just scratching the surface here.
Well, this will be on there for sure.
Okay.
Text or phone call?
Again, I am one of both. I am a heavy texter, but it's funny. Then when I get my statement at the end of each month and I see the minutes I've talked, staggering, usually go well into the hundreds of minutes. So I think I'm still both, because I have a very large network of people, personally, professionally, that I interact with in some form every day. Some are just heavy texters back and forth, and other people, it's still like pick up the phone, call them, and have a chat. So I'm still in the camp of heavily using both, and my bill says the same.
So you're tracking it. Has it gone up? Have you seen any skews in phone text versus phone?
Like over the decades, you know, it's probably, you know, texts have caught up to phone. But the interesting thing is my minutes used actually hasn't come down. So I don't know what that says. Talk back to what I said. Max is talkative. Yeah, that's it.
That's great. Fancy restaurant or food truck?
Yeah, probably more fancy restaurant still. Although now I spend more time at the field. Food truck is kind of the only option some places. So, but I do like a nice meal.
Because it depends on the day sometimes.
I could make it most days.
It's amazing how those quick answers can reveal so much. Let's get back to some of the bigger stuff.
Sure.
In 2020, just as the world was facing a global public health crisis, you were also facing a health challenge of your own, your cancer diagnosis. How did that time reshape your perspective?
Yeah. As I said earlier, I probably couldn't come at a worse time in terms of like what else was going on in the world. There's never a good time to get a cancer diagnosis. That was probably among the worst times. But like I said, the takeaways for me was just, look, the world is hairy and scary sometimes. So the stuff that's out of our control, acknowledge, but just know you can't change it. It's there. And focus your energies on the things you can control. And again, at that time, things I could control were not obsessing over Dr. Google and seeing what this was all about. That was one of the best pieces of advice my doctor gave me. Is like, look, you're an inquisitive mind. You like data. You like information. Yes, guilty as charged. Do not go online. Do not look this stuff up. it will serve you no good. We've got a plan. We're meeting the oncologist in 10 days. Let's sit tight till we meet with the oncologist, then see where we go. And I respected that. And I've told people that as well. And so kind of a bit of the leadership message around that, I guess, is the world is awash in information. It's at your fingertips, and it's just getting faster and faster, which is, for most cases, great. The amount of information we have at our fingertips, the amount of processing horsepower you've got out there changing by the day to disseminate and analyze and distill information is incredible. But it can be dangerous too, right? And sometimes too much knowledge that's also uninformed and unstructured in a situation like this can actually be quite damaging, because you can go down a real bad rabbit hole of negative information when it comes to health. It's all out there, trust me. When you start looking up survival rates and things like that, there's almost more stories and cases out there of bad outcomes than good ones, and so what you're looking for may not always be out there.
Sounds like you'd be better off looking at more positive things and not looking at worst case scenarios.
Maybe not even that. That can lead to a false sense or overly positive. I think my takeaway here was, and I think there's applications of life elsewhere, is there's places and times you have to trust the professionals. I know this gets questioned all the time, right? The last 5 years with our healthcare system has exposed a lot of mistrust, I think, now. And now look, you have measles outbreaks. Come on. We got rid of this. But it is sometimes you have to trust the experts. Now, let me take that to a corporate and a leadership place. As a leader, I could micromanage and, second guess and undermine and, dig into every single part of the group, or I got to trust the experts. In highly technical fields, and, we are one. I have an engineering group now, but highly technical. These are the experts. That's what we pay them to do. That's what they went to school. We have PhDs in there. You got to trust the experts with what you've asked them to do, and to make judgments from take their advice, take their input, take their knowledge, and then make informed decisions.
Excellent. And you've turned that experience into action, not only by beating cancer, but becoming a leading fundraiser and active participant in the tour to fight cancer over the last 4 years. How's that journey influenced the way you approach your professional life from a leadership, mentorship, and standout point?
In a lot of ways, right? A cancer journey can be overwhelming. It often is. It can't be done alone, right? I think a lot of people, unfortunately, get pretty insular with a tough medical diagnosis. They may feel embarrassed. I don't know what. And become more insular. That's actually, I think, the wrong way to approach it. What I've taken away from it is, you used the term earlier, leaning in. It's funny, when that term got really popular, several years back, when Cheryl from Facebook wrote the book about, to be honest, I didn't really appreciate or really understood kind of what it meant. I was like, yeah, this is catchy and everyone's using it. But in my own personal life, I struggled to understand, what it was in my own life. Maybe I wasn't leaning in this problem. I get it now. So with cancer and the things I've taken away from it, I fully leaned in, right? And I said earlier, I'm proud that I had to go through this. I'm proud of the experience. I'm proud I had cancer. Who says that? Well, I'm saying it because I think it's I've been fortunate. I've had a good career. I have a reasonably high profile as a senior executive at a big company, and a company that supports a lot of cancer causes. So I'm using that. So that's why I'm proud to be able to use it to bring more awareness, to use that platform that I've been given to spread the word, to help raise money. So to me now, I'm like, I get it now. Okay, that's what leaning in means. I've got these things that are in my control. Again, control what you can control, and leaning in hard on it. So clearly it's personal too, right? When you think about these types of things that people get involved with. And I've been fortunate. I've been involved in not-for-profits for a long time. And I've been involved, I think, as an active volunteer for a long time. And you generally see two types of people. Thankfully, the vast majority are well-intentioned. They're there because they believe in it. They're there because they believe in the cause and want to make a difference. Thank God that's like 99%. But there's still like the 1% who are there because it looks good on LinkedIn, right? I can sniff these people out very quickly. It really bothers me, but that's the vast majority of their well-intentioned. And so when I look at those people, why are they there? Again, it's usually because of some personal reason. Cancer is a bit more on the dramatic side themselves. The majority, at least half of our board at the Alberta Cancer Foundation are cancer survivors. So when you look at that, it's like, I don't need to question why you're here, what's motivating you. I know. And it just adds that much more intention to it. I've been involved with other not-for-profits where, you get some of these trophy hunters, I like to call them, they want to join the board because it's a big name, but because they don't have a personal connection or interest or any sort of emotional connection to it, they're really not there. They're there, they show up, they're not engaged. Whereas when it comes to something like cancer, that's pretty personal for everyone and people are engaged. So that part is really inspiring and kind of builds more energy to it. So so in terms of the cancer experience, that's probably the best way I would describe it. It's, that personal impact. And when I look at it, I'm like, I actually have the ability to make a difference here. So I'm leaning right in. I'm almost flat on my face now. I'm leaning so hard into it.
No, I've seen the way you lean in on the bike ride. You have to be proud. You take the stage. You rally the troops. There's a lot of people that are there just for you. And driving by them on the road, I could see their face. I could see their cheer, the way they encourage people. It's a movement.
Yeah.
And when you're getting everyone else to lean in and to understand and appreciate that value, and I think it's infectious.
Well, thanks for being part of it this year, Mike. Like I love that you got to experience that firsthand. And that's what I tell people. I didn't get involved in this until a few years ago. Enbridge has been the title sponsor for a long time since the beginning. And, I would write a check to support, my colleagues who are riding. And I volunteered a couple times serving lunches. But I wasn't a real avid cyclist at that time. It's really not a road cyclist. So I was like, yeah, I'll do the easy stuff. And what I've told people now, and, I got brought into it the hard way, it's hard to describe until you're actually there. And that's the thing with a lot of these movements is you have to just see it for yourself, feel the emotion. I can't text you, what it feels like. You can watch some of the videos and the foundation, the tour do a great job putting these amazing videos together. That's about as close as you can get to actually feeling it. But to see, one of the patients on stage talking about their journey and their experience and the Riderless bike, which is very painfully and emotional. You can't get that any other way. So so thanks for being part of that this year.
You can count on us for next year.
Great.
So switching gears a bit, no pun intended. You've had to navigate Enbridge's ESG challenges. And lead sustainability linked financing. I'm sure there were moments in that journey where things didn't go as planned. What did you learn from that experience?
Generally, it was a great experience. It was 2018, 2019, what I call peak ESG days, and we were already well on this journey. I like to point out Enbridge has published, what's now called ESG report, was once upon a time called a CSR, Community Social Responsibility Report. Whatever you want to call it. I think we're into the 25th, 26th year of publishing that. So we've been publishing this kind of stuff since it was even an acronym. And the reason for that is we've always believed in transparency to communities about what we do. Like that's sort of fundamentally what it is. So that part was never changed. I think, as we went through it in 2018, 2019, we did a lot of really cutting edge stuff on the financing side that was tied to this. I'm super proud of that. And I think we got a lot of credit for being leading edge on that. We're not always, and intentionally not always want to be bleeding edge on things. This is one where we wanted to lead out front. We think we're doing things the right way in terms of transparency, commitment to communities, commitment to the market. Let's put our money where our mouth is. And that was sort of the impetus behind it. I think generally went well across the board. You've seen now a big pivot, right? And a lot of anti-ESG movement everywhere. You've seen companies that I'm surprised they haven't fallen over backpedaling as fast away from some of these as they have. We haven't. We still have a commitment. We still are publishing this information. But it's really interesting to see behaviors. And back to something I said earlier about volunteerism and commitment, you can kind of see who is really committed and there for the right reasons and who is there for the LinkedIn credit.
Yep. I see that. It's surprising. It's like a pendulum. It goes one way, and you're seeing that in certain places in the world.
Yeah.
I've seen documentations and contracts with global organizations who've removed every word that had to do with that specific area.
Yeah.
And targets were gone. It was completely changed. And
it's hard because there in the U.S. there is legislation that actually makes that legal or illegal to do that. So there is some structural challenges as well. So some of it is, I'd say, intentions of companies and their commitment, and some is there's actually laws in place now where you can't have that in there, which is quite surprising.
Just to show you how fast the world can move.
Well, that's exactly true. Yeah, things move and change materially faster than even when I started my career.
So looking back, personally or professionally, what have these tougher moments taught you about resilience and responsibility as a leader?
Yeah. Well, the resilience is a big one. And you talk to anyone who's gone through and, where resilience is a very applicable definition of their, style and who they are. It's never by choice, right? People go through hard things necessarily by choice. It happens. And some people come out better for it, others not. It's hard to decide or predict who or what. So you just don't know. It's until you actually go through it. But I think for sure I've come out more resilient. It's helped reframe again what's important in life. I started this conversation talking about don't sweat the little things too hard, because having gone through some tough situations, you understand it, but puts in perspective what really matters. You have all the money in the world, but if you have a health challenge and you're going to be gone in a year, well, that's not really worth much, is it? So it really puts things like experiences and relationships higher in terms of priority list than money, title, those sorts of things.
You've recently stepped into the role of SVP Operations and Engineering for Enbridge's liquid pipelines. Given everything you've seen, done, and learned, what excites you the most about being a leader in the space now?
It's my first time at Enbridge leading frontline staff, right? If you think about what Enbridge does as a company, we move energy from point A to point B. That's it. It could be electricity, could be natural gas, could be oil, but we move energy from point A to point B physically. So this is a great opportunity for me because this is a group of 1,700 people across North America. We were joking earlier, my travel schedule has been hellacious the last while, coast to coast, north, south. It's been everywhere, but that's where our assets and that's where our people are. So it's very different for me. I've always managed smaller teams in central locations, typically white collar MBA finance type people. And now I've got a very broad set of folks from, the engineers to electricians, mechanics, techs of every kind who physically touch and work on our assets every single day versus behind an Excel spreadsheet or on a computer. So it is really who we are as a company, and the leadership approach. And someone asked me this week when I was in Montreal. I was like, it's the same, it's different. And what I mean by that is it's the same in that fundamentally you've got human beings who have a profession and an occupation and a trade or a specialty, however you want to describe it. They've worked hard for that. They're providing for their family. They live in a community. They're a community member. So that doesn't change whether you live in Calgary, Houston, or whether you live in Minot or Cornwall, Ontario, or it was. It doesn't matter. So that part's all the same. But then, what drives people, what motivates people, what really gets them excited for work is very different, right? When you're talking to field and operations people, it is very collaborative, hands-on. You're on site. You're in the truck together for hours at a time. You're in a pump house together hours at a time. So it's a different kind of work versus my corporate development team where you're in cubes next to each other, but a lot of it's sort of more independent work. You get together and chat. So, but what it kind of came down to, and this is the word I used just the other night when talking to group, is it's still the camaraderie of it. That part I've come to see is still the same. So if it's a field group somewhere working on projects to the office staff, the camaraderie is really what brings people together. So far, and I'm only a few months into it, I would say the differences are far less than I would have expected. Like fundamentally, what drives people, what motivates people, what excites them, what inspires them to bring their best to work every day. It's kind of the same, regardless of where you live and what you do. So that I think that's been my biggest takeaway right now.
Sounds like a fun adventure.
It is fun. Yeah, I'm going to a place I never would have otherwise.
And in your time at Enbridge, you've experienced different sides of the organization. How do you see that perspective shaping the way you think about the energy transition over the next 18 years?
Yeah, this is great. Like this couldn't come at a better time. So for the first 12, 13 years of my career, I saw Enbridge and the energy sector from reports and PowerPoint presentations and slides, right? Asset map and energy flows, and you're reading consultant reports on supply and demand fundamentals. So for the vast majority of my time here, that's been my direct exposure to the energy sector, and that's important. But now I'm seeing physically the pipeline that's actually moving that. I was down in Corpus Christi, Texas last week, our big export terminal. We were filling 2 VLCCs, so these are the biggest crude tanker ships there are. We're physically right there. We're watching them get filled that are now being exported off to Europe after. So it's a totally different perspective. Now it's like the physical manifestation of all the stuff I see on paper. And I see the teams that are in there installing new valves and upgrading this and maintaining that, the physical part of actually that energy flow. Whereas before it's just on paper and in slides. But could I tell you what that actually looked like physically? Probably not. So this is really cool. It's been a great kind of transition now, having a good fundamental understanding to now the physical part of it.
And you've made new friends.
I made a lot of new friends. Yep. It's benefited a big team, and as I've said a few times today, the people side of it is highly important to me. Probably the most important thing for me. I have a lot of people now, which is great. Just more opportunities to get to know interesting people in interesting places.
So you've been a visible advocate for diversity and inclusion. What does inclusive leadership look like in practice, and how are you embedding that into your organization?
Yeah. So to me in practice, and I mentioned it earlier too, is it's just engaging and involving people more, right? There's you see it a lot in the corporate world, but I see it in the field too. There's always a bias to talk to the most senior or the perception of the most senior person, right? If you've been to Japan a lot, right? Japan is still very hierarchical, or even the way you sit in a meeting room, right? The most senior person sits at a table and it fans out, and you have the most junior people at the end. And rarely do they get engaged in the conversation. You're not even looking. You'd never even break eye contact. I mean, you would just be like this. I'm very conscious of that because I just feel there's a better way to do it. But I've also been that person, right? I've been that junior person. I've been that visible minority who, like, boy, I know I'm the only one who's different in this room. So, and you don't need to tell me. I know, I can feel it. So I'm just more aware of it. And so what it means in practice for me, from a leadership perspective, is hold down the table. What do you think? You're in this meeting. What do you think? In my old corp dev group, we often get a lot of banks coming in for meetings and pitches. A lot of the good bankers will bring juniors to the meeting too. They spent all night putting the book together. But it's also important for them to see client meeting, but very rarely would they ever be called on. It's like, you're there to be seen and not heard. And my attitude is, if you brought them here, it's fair game. And so both to make a point of, you brought them here, it's fair game, but also for that person, like, you worked on this, let's hear from you. And we'd always catch them off guard. It's like, go over that they're dead tired because they're up all night putting nothing together, and just tell them, hey, what do you think of that? And usually it's just like a stunned look, but they also knew the answer because they worked on it. So to me, like, it's things like that, right? It's engaging people at the table, those voices in the room or in the field that otherwise they would just assume nobody's going to talk to them, assume they're not seen. And so just physically. So I think it starts to bring in those different perspectives. It shows other leaders too. Like, if I'm doing it, I think the savvy leaders are like, okay, shit, next time that's by calling that person. So let's make sure we're better prepared. So now, by virtue of that, they have to engage and involve that person more because they know I might just call on them, or I might poke them and say, what do you think? And so now they have to actually pull that person in a little bit more actively into the conversation. To me, that's what that looks like. It's not hard, but it does take time, and it takes some intention of doing it.
Well said. Looking ahead, 3 to 5 years, what kind of leader are you striving to become? And what kind of legacy do you hope to leave behind at Enbridge?
On the leadership side, look, I love what I'm doing. I think I'm generally doing it well. So I think a continuation of that, right? It's getting to know folks, getting to know our business, asking the right questions, supporting people, making tough calls too, right? Like, all I've talked about today, to be fair, has been all the good side of leadership. There are tough parts too, right? You got to make tough calls. That's why those roles aren't easy. You often have to make tough calls with imperfect information, or tough calls where it feels like a lose-lose and you're just trying to pick the lesser of the two evils. So those are never easy. That's just part of business, part of anything. So getting better at that. But I think generally my philosophy on people, I'm continuing that. There's no change. Legacy, I don't love that. And I think this is a problem, especially in big corporations. People get too wrapped up with their legacy, and people sometimes stay around too long thinking about legacy. You hear about it all the time in Succession. I don't know if you watch the show Succession. That's a perfect example of what I'm talking about, right? Great show. But legacy, like, at the end of the day, we're a corporation. People come and go. And often you see it where it's the next man or woman up do as good or a better job as the person before. That's great. Like I said earlier, make the place better. Leave it better than you found it. And that's how it should be. So for me, when I think about legacy, it's less about the stereotypical view, the Logan Roy, Succession view of legacy. To me, legacy I want is, how I felt, like I said earlier, how people treated me, especially early in my career. That's the kind of stuff you don't forget. And so that's the stuff I think about, like, how do I treat people? So 10 years from now, I'd like people to remember interactions I had with them, that ask about their family. Did I support them through a tough time as a leader? Did we build an incredible team? And like, this team had it, like that kind of stuff, right? It's a bit more the emotional side, but that's the stuff people remember. They don't remember a PowerPoint presentation or a pat on the back I gave them for, here's such a great job, employee of the month. Like, maybe, but I think generally people remember how people made them feel, good or bad. Like, that's the stuff it's hard to forget. And so when I think about legacy as a leader, probably the next person behind me will do at least as good, if not a better job. But hopefully there's some interactions and the way I treated people will be remembered, and they will then take it on and, build their own team in the same manner and light.
So your actions are reverberating throughout the organization.
I hope so. It's hard to measure, but I hope so. And that's what that's really what the legacy is. Can you change how people feel and their interactions with other people at work? But the way you manage and treat and lead people, there's a million ways you can do that.
And what advice would you give to emerging leaders who are trying to find purpose in industries that are often complex, like energy?
You're never going to know everything. So I think a lot of leaders, especially new leaders, really get tied up feeling like they need to know everything all the time. And I get it. And there's an insecurity to it, which is totally understandable. There's a balance. You do have to have an understanding of your business that you're leading and the team. Really, you do have to understand what's going on. So it's not an abdication of that, but you have to recognize you're never going to know everything all the time, right? That's why you have folks doing that stuff. You need to know what you need to know, but you don't need to know everything they know all the time. And I think that's the slippery slope you'll see sometimes, where that thirst for information all the time, that's sort of what manifests micromanagement, right? It's like calling you 4 times a day. What about this? Show me this, show me that. And it's hard. And I've been guilty of this too. I have enough humility to accept that, especially in roles where I brought a lot of subject matter expertise. So I kind of knew I would be kind of poking at things really deep into the weeds. So I think for the leaders, especially newer leaders, it's trying to find that balance. It's way harder than it seems and it sounds like, but trying to find that balance where you know what you need to know without becoming overbearing. And it's not linear. There's waves, right? You're going into a board meeting, you better actually be really prepared. So you need to be down into the deep, deep weeds. But other times, just let the team do the thing. Let them do the thing. You can find out a week from now. You don't need to know today everything that's going on. There's a grand unveiling from them a week from now. Just wait for that. So you have to start to recognize that. And that just comes with time and experience, right? Where you start to get into the vibe and the flow of the team and understand that cadence of information, who's doing what, and the trust factor. Okay, they got it. I know they got it. And they'll bring me in the loop when I need to be brought in.
Yep. Time and patience.
Yep. And trust.
Yep.
Trust is a big one, both ways. So I trust you will tell me what I need to know and show me. And they trust that I'm giving that trust that I'm going to give them the time and space to do their work.
Yeah, and I would definitely echo that. I've seen time and time again, a lot of folks are unable to kind of step back. And since they have the capability or understanding, they lean in.
Yep.
And the sooner those folks would realize that isn't the most optimal way to encourage that camaraderie and collaboration, the better thing's going to happen.
I'm living it right now, right? Right now, I'm a prime example of this. I say this with a lot of experience because I came into this role I'm in now without that technical experience. So there's no ability for me to second guess and look over someone's shoulder. I need to ask the right questions. I need to actually rely on them more than they need me right now for a lot of that. So it's forced me into an uncomfortable spot, but that's what development and learning looks like. Whereas in my old roles, I knew I could poke in, I could actually down to the lowest level, ask around, and I would understand what I was getting back. So this is a great challenge. And that's why I think opportunities like this to really put you out of your comfort zone can be quite enlightening and productive for someone's career development.
Absolutely. You are preaching to the choir. Now, one final question.
All right.
Iterate or disrupt?
Iterator. Yeah. I'm an iterator. Our business is largely in the Enbridge value proposition. It's stable, steady, low risk, and which aligns. I think that's why it works for me. It kind of aligns with my own personal approach to life in a lot of ways, and so I'm much more an iterator. We talked a lot about it today, which is I like to pick up where someone left off, start to tweak a few things, bring my own flavor, my own approach to it. Me hand off to the next leader and then go on to the next one. So much more of an iterator.
Love it. Max, thank you. This was an amazing conversation. Thank you, Max.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me today. Really appreciate this.
Cheers. To our audience, thank you so much for joining us in the Iteration Lab. If you enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, or share content so we can bring you more conversations just like this one. Until next time, keep moving the dial.